Oh, hey, we're running. Peace, long life, live long and prosper, etc., etc. May your journey be free of incident. Yeah, I forgot I left these things laying on the ground. Or on the table here. Yes, it's backwards. I can't switch it once we're underway. I put the list on the back if it happens to help any of you. Specializing in antique tractor repairs. Diagnostics, both analog and computer. Cylinder head work. Cold casting repairs. Chainsaw repairs and sharpening. And chain repair. You say, you can't be, I'm 64 years old. If I'm not an expert on some of that stuff, I'm close enough. Okay? Alright, what am I doing on here today? I think the number was TSX540, Marvel Chevrolet carburetor on a 40 John Deere. Well, we had two of them. The 40 standard, or utility. I don't know if that's a 40S or a 40U, whatever they want to call it, but I think the tag just said 40. The other one, however, says 40T. That's a high wheeler. I think 34 or 36 inch rim. Can't remember which. It's like a 9.5 something or other, but it's a lot taller rim. The utility is 24 inch rim, 11.2, 28 or 24, something like that. 12.4. Usually it's 11.2, 24. And he'd been pulling some logs with it. And that was the one that had the horrendously stuck piston. And well, it hadn't melded yet, just rusted. And we got that broke free and soaked it enough and ran it and spun it over enough that the rings apparently started to free up again. And the reworked the cylinder head and got her back together running good. Well, I did enough stuff to get it running, figuring he's going to have to overhaul it later. He's out there pulling logs with the darn little bugger. It's running so good. We ran into carburetor trouble with both. Now, what Bill had done was he got a carburetor kit for each one, and a float. We had trouble finding the kit for the second one. The first one had a total and complete kit. And if I remember right, he ended up ordering either two kits, or whatever it was. It was a little more difficult for the second one. But we got it done. Both of them needed a float set. Well, the first one had to have a float set. The second one, we could have used the old floats, but he's like, nah, we'll put the new ones in. Well, we found out afterwards, if you don't need to put a new set of floats in the TSX540 carburetor, keep the old floats in there. I had a problem with both of them. And the T, the carburetor was immediate trouble. We put it on there, fuel went through, couldn't stop it. Shut it off, tore it apart, opened it up. I took a look at the imprint in the gasket of the lower body to the upper body, the gasket in there. Well, this time I'd pull it apart, turn it upside down, put bolts in the holes, 1, 2, 3, 4, to hold the gasket where it belongs. Then I looked down the side of the float. Now, mind you, I hadn't done anything to the float except move it up and down just a little bit to get the level right. The level is approximately 1/4 of an inch from the gasket face. Well, I'm looking down, and the seam of the gasket was barely, you couldn't even say it was a 64th of an inch hardly. A 30, so how does the progression go? 1/25 to an 1/8, to a 16th is 62 1/2, to a 32nd is 31 1/2. Do you get my progression? So down there between the 64th, which is 15 and change, to a 32nd, you could see that could rub. All it has to do is wiggle wrong. And then on top of that, both floats had an inner lead blob. Both of them. And that's the closing. They solder it all together, get it all put together right the way they want it, everything looking good, most likely on a jig. And then to finalize it, when everything cools down, they just go with a little blob of solder, because it's very, very thin metal, brass, then put it there to do the final closing of the floats so they don't leak. Well, it was huge. I mean, sticking out there like an 1/8 of an inch or more. And now they have a little shape to them, and they were too close. There was only two things I could do. One of them is I cleaned off took a file, and I sat there for half an hour to an hour, just cleaning that off without damaging the floats otherwise. Take that brass or the solder nub off of there. Got it down so it was reasonable, and then took the two floats. I tried to bend them outward straight. No, because it folds and everything goes bad. And what I found out was all I had to do is bend them, even the bottoms alone, bend them outward just a little bit, because there's plenty of room on the outside now. They're too close. Problem solved on that one. The other one had a similar problem, but I tore it apart and looked at it because it didn't do it all the time. He says, no, I got through running it the other day. Everything's fine. Fired up the next time. Gas is pouring out after it's right. I put it down to an idle. I guess one time it stalled on him, I think. But I've had that happen before where you just run along, everything's fine. Blah, tractor gas runs out. Well, in this case, the new float was just plain too narrow, and occasionally would rub on all I had to do was rub on the side a little bit, because they need to move perfectly free. So what did I do? Well, when I had it upside down, I just took the bottom edge of them and folded it out. That's all I had. Took a look at it, said, yep, it helped. So since it did help, put it back together, it started leaking again. Well, I had the whole carburetor off. So we're theorizing that I either dislodged some dirt or something I banged in the fuel line came out. And that's real common on these old girls. There's no filter. There's just a bowl, sediment bowl. And if the gas goes into the sediment bowl really very fast, it swirls, takes some of the dirt up and through it. So you get trouble now and then. The plating on the inside of the steel line can come off. There's a lot of stuff that can happen. If you put sealer on the inlet gas fitting like you're supposed to, sometimes that breaks off and goes in, even as minuscule as it could be, because you can't see in there. You do your best. That's it. So I put it back together, and we ran it for quite a while, and running the charging system, shut it off, and I had a screwdriver and a rubber dinger, the elbow, and we waited, and a while later, nothing, and we monkeyed with a few things and changed the regulator, fired it up and checked that again, shut it off, same thing, no gas leak. I just said, well, because these things can have crap coming out of the tank and get here. And they said, and we're dealing with foreign parts. Said in my case, I haven't had hardly any leak through at all, but I still shut the gas off every time. He says, yeah, I do that too when I'm done. He says, just frustrating when in the middle of things it leaks. Yep, it do. So, now, if Bill happens to watch this, I didn't forget what I had said before. He's got 8 hours of free labor. He got 8 hours of free labor. So when I charged him today for the 3.5 hours I had in there, it may have seemed kind of odd, but there was already 8 hours of free labor built into these two tractors. So, and at $50 an hour, that can be painful. But I told him too that, yeah, he wasn't going to pay the full bill for these things. Because the one tractor is history. Back when we were kids, I think I was, probably that tractor before I was born, if I remember what he told me today, and pretty close to when Bill was born. So that tractor has some history, and it worked our old farm before we sold the farm, and is still working our old farm today. Not that tractor, but Bill and his family. So that's kind of how that one works on that. But those are the things we ran into on these carburetors more than anything else. Just the floats are bad. Just do your best. What was the other one? Well, there was the solder, and there was the floats just plain being too close. And there's not a whole lot you can do about that. If you had something to pinch, there's a little tab that comes out to the floats. It's a little narrow tab, but it has a rib in it. It's possible if you had something that could do a pinch and put a little whoopee on the outside edge of that little strap, you might be able to get the thing to, but I'd be dubious about that. I thought about it, but I couldn't figure out a reasonable way to do it. I'd have to tear up a nice set of pliers. Well, what would it mean? It'd mean I'd have to put a bead on the one jaw, file it to perfection, and then hand file a groove in the other jaw so that I could pinch them and maybe get them to bend out. I don't have a float to experiment with, so I haven't done it. The rib's in there because the brass they use is A, cheap, and B, too thin. The old ones, most of them, it was thick enough brass, there was no rib that they punched in there. Does that change it? Well, the only thing it changes is if you could pinch that little rib, it would move easier, but it would also bend it up and down. So there's a lot you have to watch on the floats. But those are the major things. The other one was rust. The bodies are always warped. Another fella on here with a same style carburetor, but it was a TSX114 instead of a TSX540 that these 40s, M's, and others have. But the lower bowl can easily be plate of steel and have it resurfaced or machined, okay, as smooth as possible. You put a piece of 120 or 150 grit over the top of it, wrap it around it, because mine's about 4 inches wide and 10 long, I think, but you could go a foot long, but I'd say 10's a minimum. And I wrapped it with particular sandpaper that I have here. It's supposed to be good for wood, metal, etc., etc. A big old sheet, 8 by 11. Folded it over it, laid it on the bench, and I took the carburetor and ran it up and down, turned it, angle, ran it, turned it the other angle, ran it, turned it 180 around, ran it back and forth, turned it, and kept working until I got the entire area contacting. You say the gasket will make up for it. Modern gaskets in these kits is not that good. So you'll have to go with that. Let's see, what did I have? Well, those are the main things on these carburetors I had trouble with. Now, I did go on to Amazon, and they have, you would think it was MSC, Manhattan Supply Company. I was ordering specialized 3/8 taps and other sizes to clean out some of these jet holes. Yeah, you get them out of there, but there's still crap in there, so you got to turn that thing in and it binds, you're screwed. You know what I mean? I mean, you're in trouble. So if I do have a problem, then if you have to use any kind of heat or whatever, heating and cooling, and you get the jet out and everything seems okay, you need to run either a rethreader if it's the right size, or a rethreader always first, or a tap down that hole and clean it out. All the holes possible. If you're doing one jet hole, try to do them all. 3/8 24, 3/8, there was an oddball one that I picked up, 3/8 32. Some of the holes are 1032s, 1024s, 1224s is another one. I think that's what the screws in the body are, is 1224. So yeah, clean them all out, all of them. Well, what's another reason to clean them out for? Well, your body screws, I like to put little never sees on the bugger. Well, whatever you put on them, even if you put Loctite, got to be cleaned to actually work well. Makes a huge difference in how these things go back together, and it can save you a lot of hassle. The taps are 10, 20 bucks a piece, and sometimes even cheaper than that. I mean, it's crazy not to buy this stuff. If you got a rethreader kit from Matco or something, Matco is a beauty. It's still K-Star, I think, is a company that builds most of them. The same stuff, works excellent. Snap-on uses it, Mac, all the larger companies, and you can order it separately. And that one, about the only useful size might be the 3/8 24 and the 1/4 20 for the screws. Maybe on some of them. Most of them are 12, like I said, 12/24, which is the coarse size. In fact, on a number 12 screw, that's almost all you can get is 24. But once in a while, I've run into a 32. I forgot what it was. There was one of the jet holes that was either in this one of these two carburetors or another one that was actually a 3/8 32. And I think there's a 3/8 28. So I've got quite a few 3/8s out there, and that might be what it is. Bottoming taps preferred, but not absolutely necessary, only in a few cases. So just something to keep in mind when you're working on these carburetors is the floats don't fit right. You're going to have to eyeball the buggers and make sure, check them out, and set them down in there and see how much room you have. That way you're going to say to yourself, hey, they look fine. Then you put them on the top body and put them in. It doesn't look so good anymore. Why? Well, one of the reasons is when you're measuring upside down and everything slides together and it's working well, one of the problems you have is as the floats go down, they go at an angle. And that top side starts getting close to the sides again. And that's most likely what's hanging up after you fix all the other stuff. But if you turn the floats up, for some reason, even that problem just seems to disappear. So why? Well, I think it's because the bars are angled. So you gotta twist them. It seems to take them all the way out there. And just a little bit. Hold them by the corners when you move them. Don't hold them by the flats. Okay, corners are top and bottom. That's where the seam is, and that's where it's going to be strongest. If you hold it on the side to bend them, you could collapse the buggers. And you say, well, that isn't going to make any difference. It does, because the floats float as well as they are float by both light weight and displacement. When they go into the gas, they displace so much. The level of the gas goes up around them. Well, when it does, there comes a point where it's going to lift it as well. What do you think ocean liners are when they're weighing millions of tons of double hull steel? What's water displacement? In other words, water goes up the hull so far that there's actual pressure on the bottom of the hull lifting the ship. So, same thing with your floats. You have to be careful with them. If they collapse, you lose that size when you have a problem. So, been there, done that. So anyway, those are things to watch out for. Clean out all the ports. Torch tip cleaners are beautiful for that. You'll see on Amazon that they have some brushes. They kind of work. But anyway, I'm coming up on, what, 16 minutes, 45 seconds. Time for me to go. And that's the best I can do for you today. Next time I'll get on here and try and talk about my Zenith carburetor on my 500B case. There was some fun I ran into there. Now remember, on these things, another one I ran into is the main jet doesn't seem to be in the new kit for the 540 that John Deere uses on the 40s and 40Ts, 40 series that we had here. I had to reuse the old one. Well, to reuse the old one, you take the nut and the needle out, and inside is a packing. Well, in the kit, the only thing that came close was one of them little white felt packings. Well, it works beautiful. But you got to get it up in there, get it soaked, and put it all together, get it soaked in gas, and come back later and snug it back up again. And you'll have a nice tight seal. It works well. But that's the only thing I could find in the kit that was supposed to go there. Usually it's something akin to an O-ring or a chevron seal or something, but not in this case because it's thread. It acted like a pipe packing, industrial pipe packing. All right, almost 18 minutes. Good night.